Hello, this is the Harpering Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So this particular episode is focusing in on the aspect of American Diner. So I'm going to take a different approach about these things. So I'm going to, of course, give my thoughts about it. And then also talk about it from the with Guy Fieri, what he did with diners, drive-ins, and dives, and cultivating that in the 21st century. And then, the historical aspect of it. And also what I think about it, the visual atmosphere or the aesthetic about diners too. All right, so let's jump into this. And also to rehash, so on this Sunday, that is, I will post the second episode for the supporters out there who support my channel. The episode will be about P. Diddy and the uncensored and content about my uncensored content, my thoughts about that, and just being really honest and getting into heart of the matter. I'm going to, go into the facts of everything that's going on and just really dive into it. So you want to hear all of that? Become a supporter. And so this will be uploaded this Sunday. And I'll remind again on Friday. All right, so let's dig in. All right, you hear chicken roosters in the background. Yeah, we got chickens, and I said this in previous podcasts. Price of eggs are high, and it's a good thing to get back to the roots of everything, and have that agriculture aspect of animals sustaining your plate and knowing where your food comes from. Okay, so here are my thoughts about, I'm going to focus on two things: diners, drive-ins, and dives, Guy Fieri, the show, and then my thoughts about the visual aspects of diners. So diners, drive-ins, and dives with Guy Fieri. So that show, and I'll get more into the facts and the specifics later on in this podcast. But that show, when I saw it initially, it was one of those things that it was exciting, and it had a little bit of a flair to it. And what I mean by that, a little bit of a flair to it, it had the aspect of talking about food, but also about travel, and also about Americana. And I thought it was neat because it influenced the culture of people to understand and respect the aspects of, specifically with the roots of American diners, and how that comes out of the aspect of the age of the, going through the Great Depression, and then more, I think, pronounced in the 50s. And so, but also to add on top of that, he made it known that, diner diving food, things of that nature. It's not just what, as they say, a hole in the wall. That with that jargon, with that kind of language saying, this is a dive, this is a hole in the wall. They don't care about how the cooking process. No, he went to places like in California and Hawaii, stuff like that, where he goes to and then that's another thing too, where the locals of that town, are friends that he knows, friends of friends, and all of this, giving you input about the best spots to eat. And so that clues into another aspect of how food is very relevant to the aspect of the experience of understanding. It's about enjoyment, and also with diners, that there are diners that understand that there's a beauty and simplicity, but also in simplicity having the opportunity to step up a notch and present simplicity but fine dining at the same time. And that is, I think, the root and the heart of the matter, why people make certain diners are really prevalent in certain cities, and then expanding out into the culture that comes out of diners, are why people keep going back and back, going over and over again to them, because of the pride that they have and to taking the time to make all the food right, to make, to put, as I say, love into it. Then you see the dedication that the chefs have, or the chef has, in their food, and how they want their customers to know that. All right, so let me get into aspects of the visual aesthetics about that, what I think about dining. And I think, instead of, going into, I just want to talk about this from my point of view, instead of finding, dry facts about it. Try to, change that up a notch with that. So, visually, the thing that the aesthetic that most comes to mind to me about diners is from the 50s. Specifically, now that this is something that, started before the 50s, diners, but the chrome and the aesthetic of the black and white tile and, the sock hop, root beer floats and soda jerks were a thing, before the 50s. But that really comes to mind when I think about diners. And specifically, because Princess in Houston, I grew up in Houston, and that's not particularly a diner. Now, there was a 59 diner that was really good and prevalent, and it really went full on in, and with the thrills and everything of the 50s sort of aesthetic of diners. And it's unfortunate they didn't make it as far as that, I don't know if it was because of COVID or what have you, but it's no longer in existence from what I understand. But those two. So with Princess, it more of the feel they focus in on the 50s, and what that aesthetic of what it like to be at a malt shop, and get that nostalgic feel. Now with the 59 diner, it's the classic diner food, all kinds of meals, as far as things like mashed potatoes, black beans, not black beans, what am I trying to think about? Black eyed peas, steak, stuff like that, along with hamburgers and a shake and fries. But you also, get that. Step it up a notch with Prince's, you see how, photos when it originally started, and I think Princess is still around now in Houston. But you get when it was built, you see the history behind the restaurant, and then you see photos. Thank you, sweet baby. And then you see the photos of icons from the 50s. But specifically with the 59 diner, you get the tile, the black and white tile, and then the chrome shaped building, and then the more pastel sort of neon color of the pink and blue, and then 59 too. Get that sort of Route 66 feel of this is a passerby sort of aesthetic. You see this off the road, you traveling or something, that sort of aspect about it. And that was a nice touch because you really get it gives you the wonderment, I think, of what it might have been like to be in diners of that time. And so I'm going to go into the extent about Route 66, about how the details and the facts of the matter of how that shaped and rooted the aspect of America as far as travel and people, pursuing the notion of people specifically with families getting out and taking vacations, and then along the way of the food that the diners that will pop up, and how that is all rooted and connected with the aesthetic of diners, or being something people who are passing by, travelers want to come in and take a load off, sort of things like that. All right, so with all of this said, and this next segment that's coming up, I'm going to wrap everything up with the facts of first I'm going to go into the history behind diners, and then I'm going to close out with the facts that you might know or might have not known about. Okay, hold on, just let me finish this part, and then I'll get it for you. That's my baby girl. Diners, drive-ins, and dives, and all of that. All right, here we go. Okay, excuse me. Okay, here we are. Says, in 1872, an enterprising man named Walter Scott introduced the first night lunch wagon. So with this, or add on to this, with the aspect of getting stuff out fast, hot and quickly, or a sustainable meal for people, specifically factory workers of the Industrial Revolution. That's a nice insight to get to, how the aspect of dining and diners prevail throughout time, throughout history, after the fact. So, coming out at dusk, the lunch wagons would pick up business after restaurants closed, serving workers on the late shift, newspapermen, theater goers, anyone out and about after dark and hungry for an inexpensive hot meal. A fellow would get his food from the wagon window and eat sitting on the curb. So gaining popularity, the lunch wagons evolved into rolling restaurants, with a few seats added within, first by Samuel Jones in 1887. People would soon start referring to them as lunch cars, which then became the more genteel sound dining cars, which was then around 1924 shortened to the moniker as diner. So, one distinction between a diner and a coffee shop is that the former is traditionally factory built and transported to its location. And then we get to the aspect of now no, baby, don't get on that yet, okay? Okay? Wait till I'm finished, okay? To the aspect of trucks, specifically, we're going in on upscale food trucks, the things that they do now today for anywhere from gourmet PB&Js to kimchi to all kinds of stuff. And I remember going to the U of Asia at a certain time of the day. Specifically, of course, this makes logical sense that meeting up during lunchtime. But it was a hub of food trucks where you could go and, there would be not along the lines of, traditional food truck food, but also gourmet food, all kinds of stuff. And then also with the ante of if you price it, they'll come, I guess, that sort of notion. The outrageous prices. For instance, going back to PB&J, I think there was a person selling PB&Js for a lot of money, and different gourmet stuff for a hot penny there. But I guess if the demand is there, I guess people will pay for it. So it's one of those things too. But it's one of those things. Finding the boundaries within that, but that's a whole nother subject. So, okay, so let me go into. But it's nice to have gourmet food when you think of food trucks and stuff. And going against the notion of the jargon of saying roach trucks, which that comes out of the prevalent at the time that was seen as low class to go and eat at a food truck or something that was specifically for people, men specifically, who worked in construction. And with the roach trucks giving the notion that the aesthetics as far as the hygiene and taking care of the food was lax. So anyway, that's another tidbit, point I'd like to put out there. So, former traditionally factory built and transported to its location rather than constructed on site. The first stationary lunch cart circa 1913 was made by Jerry O. Manning, founder of one of the first dozen factories in New Jersey, New York, and Massachusetts that factored and shipped all the diners in the U.S. At their peak in the 50s, there was 6,000 across the country, as far-flung as Lakewood, Colorado, and San Diego, though the highest concentration remained in the Northeast. Today, there are only about 2,000, with New Jersey holding the title for most diner-supplied states at 600 plus. New ones are still made occasionally by 3 remaining factors, and old ones are painstakingly restored by people like Gutman, who has worked on some 80 diners and currently has a couple of projects going, like the Owl Diner in Lowell, Massachusetts, and the Alley. It says it's located on the alley on the side. While Gutman is diplomatically reluctant to identify his favorite diner, one of his mainstays is Casey of Nantucket in Massachusetts, the country's oldest operating diner. And you want more of the specifics of this, of course, about who this person is. with get more of the aspect of what is going on this article. Of course, I will provide the link for you in this episode, and you can read even further. So, they've supported 5 generations of family on 10 stools, and the person who has been interviewed says, gesturing to a photograph of a 10 by 20 and a half foot oak interior diner car constructed as a horse-drawn lunch wagon in 1922. So bought secondhand 5 years later by Fred Cassie and moved from its current location 4 miles away. So in the 80s, when Gutman's daughter Lucy was little, no sooner had they pulled up to the counter, Casey, but Fred's great-grandson Patrick would automatically slide the package of chocolate cookies down to Lucy, pour her chocolate milk, and get her grilled cheese sandwich going on the grill. And that's a nice touch, too, with the aspect of how diners specifically give that heartfelt feel of the quality and the touch of that, to where you feel as if you're, sitting at home with your family, a family affair. And it's nice to have that sort of appeal with diners too. And I think that's a lot of the staple why people are drawn to diners. They have that family aesthetic of, you can sit back and relax and, and be with, and draw in the warmth of the atmosphere. All right, so I'm going to get into another aspect about diners, American diners. So here we go, this other article. So this is entitled The American Diner, A Brief History. So this was first written in February of 2018, and it's by Christopher Mark. So, stop, baby. Leave that alone. The classic New York diner once seemed as enduring and as the American Statue of Liberty, but the diner is a dying breed, with city diners closing in droves due to rising rent, food costs, and consumer tastes changing. These days, with the spread of craft culture, coffee culture, there are no shortages of cafes to get one's caffeine fix, and the rise of more artisan approach to eating. Traditional diner menus are falling out of flavor. Diners were born in the late 1800s, evolving from food carts that, as I mentioned earlier, sustain hungry night workers with sandwiches, coffee, and pies. So it says, savvy owners began evolving the model through revamping outdated railroad cars to provide shelter and seating. To add warmth to the train cars, owners began adding and inviting touches such as wallpaper, flowers, and boxes. So in the 1930s, it saw a move toward the sleek, streamlined design, more in line with the times, with the signature open kitchens. With the advent of World War II and the growth of women in the workforce, the diners catered to the interest and replicated home-cooked meals. Other than the introduction of neon in the 80s, the general aesthetics of diners has remained rather retro, from chrome accents and white clean leather banquets to soda fountains and name badge waitresses. The institution are the pillars of the Americana and are stop baby, immortalized in countless cult films, arts, and literature, as well as the fashion movement. And that's definitely true. With the aspect of, specifically, from, don't do that, baby, okay? From, even before then, with, when even now, wearing the hats, the trucker hats and stuff like that, and specifically with the kind of, I guess, the aspect of revamping the poof skirts, the poodle skirts, and how, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Mishino, the fashion line, when they did specifically, with the Barbie sort of fashion show they did a while back, and they, had that kind of 50 nostalgia theme going on there, things of that nature. So yeah, that's neat. And then of course films like I'm sure they're going in on with Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino, when they're in a diner for most of the time in those scenes and stuff like that. Okay, so, and then, of course, going to end with the fashion with that, interlaced with that, with Uma Thurman with her beatnik style of how she dressed and, things of that nature. So, diners have stuck to their humble roots, remaining a democratic dining experience. So many are open 24 hours, catering to... I wonder what they mean by democratic dining experience. It's quite interesting. And if y'all have thoughts on that, I'd like to know. So, reach me through email, Substack, of course, X, and of course, fill in those comments on YouTube. All right, so says many are open 24 hours, catering to all manner of guests, from blue-collar workers, and after a shift, teenagers sipping milkshakes on dates, to families having a road trip, pit stop, or senior citizens gossiping over their daily cup of joe. That's cute and funny. Okay, so for many diners, I hold a nostalgic appeal, not just for a simpler way of eating, but for a less fuzzy time. But as diners become increasingly more of dining curiosity rather than regular destination, time could be running out of the taste of a piece of living American history. And they're, hyping the aspect of how diners were really prevalent, more so a lot in New York, and then how you can get more of a feel of the aspect of the Americana roots in dining if you go to places like, go to the city of New York and go in certain, not city of New York, excuse me, let me revamp that back. Go to the state of New York and visit the specific cities in New York and, those diners. All right, so I'm going to go out and end talking about facts of diners, drive-ins, and dives. All right, here we go. The show was created by news producer. So diners, drive-ins, and dives has been such a prolific show for the Food Network. Is a staple that one might assume that it just naturally came from the channel's food-based entertainment mandate. But actually, someone had to come up with the idea. It says, and that someone had a background not in culinary programming, but in television news. His name is Dave Page. And before he created the concept that would become diners, drive-ins, and dives, he was a network news producer attempting to branch out into other forms of TV programming. Now he's best known for being the man who created Triple D, particularly after a breach of contract suit had him sharing in some Headlines with host Guy Fieri. Little of his pre-Food Network producer work involved content other than network news, but he is credited as the segment producer on a 1994 TV special entitled I Want a Baby. That's quite an interesting tidbit there. So the show started off as a one-off special. So this one-off special was in 2006. So it says, just imagine having one episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives instead of hundreds. This harrowing idea isn't too far from how things really turned out, since the show was reportedly began as a mere one-off special to gauge the potential of a rising Food Network star Guy Fieri. So according to Dave Page, the hour-long Diner, Drive-Ins, and Dives special was born in 2007. Oh, so I guess that was not a correct information that I found in researching. So his special was born in 2007 after one on-the-spot promise to a Food Network executive to deliver a one-sheet pitch over the weekend for a development meeting. So it went so well, in fact, that Page, with David Page being, the producer, Fieri and company got to work on turning the special into a series, presumably without even dreaming that it would still be running over 15 years later. All right, so this tidbit about David Page left the show on bad terms and sued Food Network. Unfortunately, it hasn't always been harmony and giant cheeseburgers behind the scenes of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. And then also, when I get to that point, it says a lot about Guy Fieri's character, how he responded, and the midst of this battle. So if you watch the credits of more recent episodes, you might notice that producer and show creator David Page is no longer affiliated with the program, and it isn't a part of the network. So as reported by Star Tribune, Page not only exited the show, but sued Food Network for breach of his contract. His suit alleged that the network had conspired to oust him from the show while also limiting host Guy Fieri's ability during shooting. Food Network filed a countersuit of its own, and the two parties eventually reached an undisclosed settlement in end of 2011. But that didn't stop Page from dishing some Triple D dirt to the Star Tribune. He says, the reason I lost Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives is because of Guy Fieri. Page told the paper, as happens to many instant celebrities, he pretty quickly decided he no longer wanted to be produced or directed. Guy worked for more than a year to try to get the network to take the show away from me and give it to another production company, where he presumably would be in control. He wanted to be the person making all the decisions, even though the decisions Page had been making create a remarkably successful show and doing wonders in suit of Guy Fieri's career. So Fieri was much nicer in his own press statement. He said this, Guy Fieri: Dave Page has been very instrumental in how that whole show started. I've got to give him nothing but thanks for getting it going. Dave deserves a lot of respect for how it got started with the show, with me, and where we've gone. I think Dave's got big opportunities opportunities in front of him. So the show was developed on the fly. Before his exit from the series, producer Dave Page spoke in more positive terms about the origin of diners, drive-ins, and dives to Heavy Table. It all came out from meetings between Page and the Food Network on which he was attempting to produce a series. Page had recently formed his own production company after working in other capacities on shows that aired on the Food Network. But he was eager to break out with a series of his own. But none of his pitches were accepted by the powers that be. So he says, basically, I continued to call an executive at the Food Network and said, hey, I want to pitch you something. Page recalled. So it says that the person who he pitched this to said okay because she was nice to do so. She's a nice person, a nice lady to do so, and he told her stuff and said no thanks, and was under this wall of rejection that Triple D was born. One day, one day I'm on the phone with her, and she's almost getting exacerbated because I think she wanted to help me. Exhausted. And, excuse me. And she said, don't you have anything else about diners? So I said, oh, yeah. There's a thing that I've been developing for a while called diners, drive-ins, and dives. But Page revealed that the show had only been developed at that very instant. I, in fact, had just made up the name out of thin air in response to her question. That's interesting. So Guy Fieri isn't actually there for all the shooting. Guy Fieri is a busy man with multiple TV series and restaurants under his management at the same time. While a typical episode of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives make it appear that Guy Fieri is present for all the shooting in each of the featured restaurants, filming on the show and structured so that Fieri doesn't have to be physically present with the entire time, and the magic and the power of editing, that's really something. And then, it goes the same to say for different shows, specifically with hosts and, high profile hosts. And I'm sure they follow that same format too. As producer David Page explained to Heavy Table, the guy is very busy. We're very careful only with structure and there can be creativity in the structure. So at this point, the how everything flows of production, the show is like a machine. Only with a well-coordinated research process, shooting process, and planning process, it can be as painless as possible for him to get most of the work done in the smallest amount of time without worrying about the mechanical details. So standards for inclusion on the show are high. So you might not think of the restaurants featured on the show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives as having to exceed too many standards of quality, but the makers of the show have always been interested in the best of food. The best of food, that is. In his talk with Heavy Table producer David Page referred to these standards as the food bar, making it clear that it has always been pretty high stakes for, their judgment of the type of food that they would go to. And I'm adding my aspects about that. So the rule that I'm very proud of is that Guy and I both agree from the beginning, if you're pardon my French, there's no BS with this, If he tastes something and likes it, he likes it. If he tastes something and he doesn't like it, he doesn't like it. And by the same token, Every place we have gone has to make real food, and it has to be good enough. I say that as a positive, not good enough, just getting by. It's not like we want to walk into the place that has 75% frozen Cisco pre-prepared products, but they make 2 specials a week that will knock you off your bottom. That's not good enough, Page said. That means that the majority of the diners, drive-ins, and dives that get considered for inclusion on diners, drive-ins, and dives don't make it onto the show. Page recalled that one list of some 80 spots in Houston, Texas, that was dwindled down to 7 on the actual series. That's interesting to know. So as you know, and then Houston, I think is still considered a foodie town, but hey, doesn't make it, just doesn't make it. So as if it wasn't already clear, inclusion of the honor is definitely a badge of honor for the eateries. So the show has racked up an impressive list of celebrities. At this point, diners, drive-in, and dives is a basic cable icon, and its attracted a far amount of surprising big names that you might not expect to see on Food Network. Scrolling through a full cast is pretty impressive, provided for the patience to hunt for recognizable names and aimed all the less famous restaurants and other guests credited. So rock legend Sammy Hagar, and then Matthew McConaughey, and then Kid Rock, Dennis Miller, Martin Sheen, Rosie O'Donnell, and Adam Sandler, just to name a few. So I'm going to close out by saying this. So being featured on the show can be a double-edged sword. While being featured on diners, drive-ins, and dives is generally a boom for any restaurant, it's not without the downsides. It can be a struggle, the good kind of struggle. For eateries that were used to small trickles of curious customers to suddenly have the dealings with the tidal wave of hungry customers who have viewed their show on Triple D. And so, let me see. Restaurants complained about this to Houston Press. So the owner reportedly did not appreciate the new clientele attracted. And then, one restaurant that reported this to the Houston Press, new clientele attracted by the show, even if they presumably appreciate the money that with each new customers brought in, they're airing their grievances about it. And then Twin City businesses, Eric, another restaurateur, the owner of Northern Waters Smoked Sauce in Duluth, Minnesota, and Eric Gorit, I believe. Forgive me for the pronunciation of his last name, but Eric, he said it cost him almost $15,000 when all was said and done. As far as the shooting, the Triple D shot. So that's a lot. But once the episode hits, it can be worth a fortune in advertising. So potential pits or not, most restaurant owners would jump at the chance to be highlighted by Guy Fieri's well-known enthusiasm, and that's, needless to say, that's, more than makes up for, the either the influx of a whole lot of more clientele than you're used to, or the cost of them coming out to shoot. You'll get it back tenfold. All right, so I'd like to know what you all think about American diners and your take on it. So either, again, email me Follow me on Substack and give me comments on Substack. And please fill up those comments in YouTube. And I appreciate you, the people and all of you that listen to me on YouTube. Greatly appreciate it to give more and more feedback. Thank you. And also, of course, X. Follow me on X and give me comments on X. All right, so this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye.